Welcome back. This is Richard Golson. We're looking at Lab 2, Build Your VPC and Launch a Web Server. And we're stepping into Task 3. We will create a VPC security group. To recap what we did in Task 2, we added additional subnets and assigned them to the appropriate route tables so that traffic could flow between the subnet and the rest of the world. So you can see here that this is essentially where we should be at now with the use of two availability zones for redundancy and the use of two public subnets and two private subnets. Again, for the redundancy, noticing that all addresses, there is no overlap within any of our addresses. These are the route tables, and both route tables, as we saw in the very first task, have two routes, both the local route, and then for the public subnet, we have a route for all zeros through the internet gateway. That means everything that's not in the local VPC will go to the internet gateway, and everything destined outside of the VPC, the all zeros, excluding these, will go to the NAT gateway. And then the NAT gateway will use the public route table to send traffic out through the lab internet gateway. So now we're going to create our VPC security group. So when we create this VPC security group, what we're really creating is a virtual firewall. When you launch an EC2 instance or an RDS instance, you associate one or more security groups with that instance. You can add rules to the security group that allow traffic to or from the instances. So it has both inbound and outbound rules. Let's take a look at what we already have. So if we go here and open up, we can take a look down here and see if we have any security groups. And currently we have one security group, a default security group that was created at the time we created the lab VPC. And if we take a look here, we can see that it has one inbound rule that allows all traffic in. And we have one outbound rule that allows all traffic out. Note, however, the inbound rule is allowing all traffic out from itself. So it's a little bit recursive. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new security group. Best practice is, so I don't have to worry about what was created here and what it's doing and not doing, we're going to create a new security group associated with a VPC, and then as we deploy our instances, we'll assign this security group that we're creating to the instance. And this ensures that we get exactly the rules that we want. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. We're going to go ahead and create a security group right here. So let me scroll this over a little bit, make it a little easier to watch. I'll create the security group, and we'll give it a name. Purpose of the security group is allow web traffic. We'll paste that in, and then I'll give it a description. We're going to enable HTTP access. So note that we're not using HTTPS. And that's intentional in the labs. So typically you want to use HTTPS, the secure version of HTTP, which is really TLS. But for the labs, in order to simplify it sufficiently so you don't have to mess around with using server certificates, they have us just use HTTP. But in practice, in the real world, in production, we'd be using HTTP access. Now, you'll note here that we need to assign this to a VPC. So I'm going to come down here and select our VPC. Security groups cannot be used across VPCs. They can only be used with the VPC you assign it to. When you create it, you can't reassign it to another VPC later. You'll have to create a new one. Now, we're going to go ahead and add a rule. And you'll notice that for the rule, it's going to be an inbound rule because we do have outbound rules. By default, when you create a brand new security group that's not the main or default security group for a VPC, you're creating one after you've already created the VPC. that only has a single rule to allow traffic out. That means that if the instance is sending traffic out, it will allow it. It doesn't allow traffic to come in. So we need to create a rule to allow traffic to come in. So we'll go ahead and add a rule here, and we're going to set the type to HTTP. So I'll click the drop down and I'll look for HTTP, not to be confused with HTTPS. They are different protocols. They're not interchangeable. Secure HTTPS cannot be used with HTTP, cannot be exchanged with HTTP. You have to use one or the other or both. So we're just going to use this. Now notice that it tells us that the port that it's actually going to be looking at is port 80. And then for the source, I want to change this to anywhere. So right now it's set to custom. What we want is to allow all traffic from the web, all HTTP traffic, to come in. We don't want to exclude it. This is a web server, and there's no reason for us to exclude traffic. I know we think of security, but web servers inherently have an insecure. They're inherently not secure because we have to allow traffic in. So we're going to do everything we can to make them as secure as we can, but it's always a risk, and it's a risk we have to assume. We'll get many ways that we can minimize or mitigate that risk, but we are going to allow port 80 traffic through, and we give it a little description. This is what we're allowing. So notice we've got a description for the security group, and then we actually have a description on the rule itself. And then we're going to go ahead and create it. You are given warnings that allowing traffic from all sources is something to avoid if needed, if you can, but we can't with this. So we'll go ahead and create it. We don't know the IP address of the sender. There's no way to know. It could be anybody. Therefore, we have to allow all IPs. So great. We've completed this task. We now have a security group. And what you're going to find is that when I go to EC2, that same security group will be displayed here. And this is the security group. Right here, you can see that's the one we just created with the appropriate inbound rule. And if I look across here, I can see that it's being used with the VPC that we've been working with, F623. If I come back over here and look at the security group we created earlier, and you can see that that is the same one, right? So good to go. We're going to go ahead and step out of this video. And when we come back, we're going to pick up with task 4, launching a web server instance. We'll be able to test our new VPC implementation. So I'll see you then.